Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to tune in to Shedding Light in conversation with survivors and advocates of domestic violence. My name is Mallory Kaloje, and along with being the director of events for A Safe Place, I will also be your moderator for this series. A Safe Place is the sole provider of comprehensive services for victims of domestic violence and human trafficking in Lake County. In light of COVID-19, we are facing new challenges as the number of domestic violence cases has increased dramatically. And now more than ever, we need to gain and spread awareness as a community so that we can amplify the voices of survivors. Today, I am so excited to be joined by one of the Safe Place's child therapists, Maria Ruiz. Maria, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Mallory.
Hi. So glad to have you here today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So as you said, my name is Maria Ruiz, and I am a child therapist here with A Safe Place. Here at A Safe Place, what I do is I do individual therapy with children as little as 2 years old, all the way up to 18. I also do family therapy with the families, including children and parents, and sibling therapy. And I travel a little bit here. I do therapy in a few different locations, in Zion, in Waukegan, and Mundelein. And since COVID, we've been able and fortunate enough to hold therapy sessions via video in order to accommodate the parents through all of these adjustments and changes.
Sure, absolutely. And tell me a little bit about the first time that you connected with the Safe Place. How did you get involved with this organization?
Yeah, actually, I am a resident of Lake County. I've lived and grew up here in Waukegan. So I know that there is a need in the community for domestic violence. Having attended Waukegan community public schools districts, I know that there's definitely a need for that. So I've been aware of the agency for my entire life. It was one of the motives, domestic violence, and helping children through the process of coming to the counseling world.
Sure.
Been in the agency for about a little bit over 2 years, and in those 2 years, I've been able to assist, counsel, mentor children and families through
Absolutely.
that takes place, and just the layers and layers of it. So I've been fortunate enough to work with this agency for this long in order to educate and advocate for the families in this community and outside resources.
That's incredible. I want to sort of dive into some other questions that I have for you pertaining specifically to the way that domestic violence affects children. We often talk about how children are the lost voices in domestic violence situations. Can you elaborate a little bit on what this means and why it's so important to amplify and educate children about using their voices? When I talked to Daniel, he had expressed, that as a child who faced domestic violence, his biggest challenge as a child going through that was not having his voice heard. So what does that mean for you? What does that mean for our community?
Yeah, that is a great statement on behalf of Daniel, and I think a statement that is made by a lot of children at different stages in their lives. Children are along for the ride. We don't call them adults until they're 18, and even when they hit that 18-year mark, they're still very confused as to where do I go from here. Often,
Sure.
we as adults, we are living our lives, and as parents, we're having a lot of things to manage, whether that's our domestic violence in our relationship and how are we effective adults, and how are we effective parents. And oftentimes the children does get missed out on meaningful moments. Oftentimes parents have to get the challenge of having to move or relocate,
Right.
over maybe a few states, and the child isn't asked about their opinion, and oftentimes that may not be very important at the time. Sometimes safety takes over priority, so a child may have to relocate schools several times a year or every
Absolutely.
community. It is difficult for them to build strong relationships when they may have to move, and when they don't have a trusting environment in their household that might create a barrier for them to make friendships as well. Or just their pain, their emotional suffering. Oftentimes we don't talk about the abuse at home. We just see it, hear it, and move on. And oftentimes we don't come back to our children and say, hey, did you see that? Did you hear that? What did you think about that? How did you feel? how can I help you? What can I do for you? So oftentimes children kind of feel left behind in that and kind of left to figure it out themselves. So with therapy, we can allow for them to build those healthy communication skills, break through the anxiety and the fear of communication,
Mm,
which is a strong and unhealthy foundation with domestic violence
yeah,
homes. And how do we bring in the parent to support their child in communicating themselves? Because we want to know what the child feels. We want to
of
build that
course.
community dynamic and family dynamic in the household.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a few cornerstones there where, we've got a child that's experiencing domestic violence, they might be moving around a lot. And at this time when they should be, that in this time where it's formative for them to be building these, relationships with people that are, built on certain fundamental principles like respect and trust and things like that, that sort of, escapes from them. Can you elaborate on some of the other barriers that children face when they are in the throes of a domestic violence situation?
Yeah, I'd say it's a very common topic today is education.
Mm,
Research shows that when a child is experiencing a lot of trauma in the household, a lot of abuse, whether it's witnessing or experiencing, the education falls short.
mhm.
For several different reasons. It could be distraction in the school. You might be thinking
Sure.
this took place in the home earlier that day, last night. What are we going to come home to? So it's that anxiety that doesn't
Right.
allow them to stay focused and motivated.
Mhm.
So
Right.
we may lack motivation in some household, or that parent that is motivating you and or holding you accountable to those grades and in a reward system as well. So I would say education falls short. And there's areas in the brain that's shown that are not developed to their full potential in some children
Mm,
because we're not giving them that experience and time to really shine those parts in the brain. And unfortunately, our anxiety will take over and will prevent us from learning. So a lot of times we do see children that might be a little bit more active and distracted, and their
mm,
education suffers. So with individual therapy and family therapy, we try to emphasize how education is not just important now, but in the future. How this will affect the child individually if
right.
parent and child don't contribute together for that child's education, which is their future. So a
Right.
lot of it is that it's how do we assist them through collaborating with the school systems, with
Mhm.
other teachers, with coaches, with anyone that we can support with in the successful education of that child. And I bring that
Absolutely.
today due to e-learning and how that's kind of jeopardizing and impacting even more so the children's success.
That's really fascinating, and I think that a lot of times in society, we have a tendency to just say, oh, this is a bad kid
Yes.
without, and we forget about that compassion piece.
Mhm.
We adults or children, we don't necessarily know what goes on behind closed doors.
Yeah.
We talk about how, domestic violence is one of those things that's the best kept secret in the world. So if we are not educating educators and community members about, things to look for, um, and those compassion factors when it comes to talking with children about, amplifying their voices, valuing their education. I think, it's just, those things are all just so important. In what ways do you feel like a safe place provides support and resources for children?
Well, first and foremost, it is the individual therapy and education, right? Our motto is to educate, prevent, advocate. As clinicians, we also try to mentor, influence, advocate, and all of those things. So
Absolutely.
I think we have a great clinical team and we work together very great in order to how do we allow and help this client or family
Mm,
shine in the community and in their household. So
yeah.
yeah, so definitely reaching out to the community, as you stated, because a lot has to do with compassion, and that's something that we do forget sometimes. It's a feeling
Yeah.
that we sometimes take for granted or think that everyone has, and sometimes
Mhm.
we don't mature that to our full potential. So kind of back to the education part is how do we create empathy? Because empathy
Absolutely.
that is thought, and we don't know what that is unless we're shown. So here at A Safe Place, we try to definitely be empathetic, advocate for the client. The client and the family knows best, and how can we assist them in their individual goals for those, what success looks like for them.
Absolutely. One more question for you. Why do you think that it is so important for A Safe Place to be having this dialogue about raising awareness about domestic violence? Not just for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but I mean, just all the time.
Oh yeah, I think I agree with you. It's important every day.
Mhm.
Domestic violence takes place in every day in a lot of households, and we can't be quiet anymore. I think that domestic violence happens more than we like to think. It's shameful, it's embarrassing, and we don't like to talk about it. And
Sure.
sometimes we have to talk about uncomfortable things in order for us to grow and sit in that uncomfortableness to build resilience, to build grit, um, to to be survivors in that sense. So I feel that we're doing a great job and letting our community know that we're
Absolutely.
here. We're here to help them in any way that they need, and we're here open with open ears and open arms to be available to them in those needs.
Yeah, and I think you really hit the nail on the head. A safe place is having the uncomfortable conversation because the uncomfortable conversations are generally the ones that are worth having.
Exactly.
Maria, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. I am truly so happy that you were able to participate in this with me. Thank you to all of our viewers for watching this today. If anybody would like more information on ways to get involved with the Safe Place, ways to advocate for survivors, or if you're in crisis yourself, ways to get resources, you can visit us at asafeplaceforhelp.org. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.